very good.
Oh, thank you.
Very good.
God, this is really a nice looking feast here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. It's good too.
The chicken's good.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Oh my goodness, Jay, a bite of that with the sweet potato. Woo. That's really good. Oh man.
Hey, it's Trey, and that is the sound of 9 people enjoying some of the best mac and cheese ever. It's time for another Us and Them dinner party, where we gather a wide-ranging group of people for a potluck of food and conversation. We continue to use this gathering as a forum to see how well we can do, sharing a table with folks who have vastly different beliefs. We began this tradition at Us and Them back in 2020 with a virtual gathering during the pandemic, and we've continued it ever since. In an election year, it can be a challenge to come together with people who disagree. This election year, I don't know what to expect. But here we are at my mom's house in Charleston, West Virginia, ready to take the plunge.
You know, I know Elliot gets a little wild every now and again. He wants to do keg stands and stuff like that.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
Come on, it's my mom's house, Elliot. Come on.
Respect.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them. We sit at a dining room table, which my mom has lovingly decorated with a red, white, and blue theme. Our feast includes roast chicken, mac and cheese, sweet potato casserole, caprese salad, and soft rolls. So with a little bit of food in us, it's time for introductions and to reveal our political beliefs. We go around the table, starting with 2 of Charleston, West Virginia's city council members.
Frank Annie, I would describe it right of center on most issues.
My name is Joe Solomon. I think I just lean towards wanting everyone to get a fair shake, and I'm a Democrat.
Jay Gould, I consider myself a conservative Democrat. There's no such critter anymore, so I'm registered Republican.
I'm Felicia Bush. I am a fiscally conservative Democrat, but a social justice liberal.
I'm Terry DeLauder, and I am a definitely lean right, but have had some epiphanies the last year due to some very liberal friends that invited me to be a part of their group discussion.
I'm Alexis Steele. You guys can call me Lexi. I would say that I am fiscally conservative, but it just depends more on the issue. I feel like in terms of social issues, I'm definitely fairly far to the left.
I'm Michael Borsick. I am very proudly Republican I wouldn't say I'm in the far right, but I'm in the middle of the Republican spectrum.
My name is Elliot Hicks. I'm certainly progressive on social issues, without a doubt, and reasonable on fiscal issues, I hope.
You might recognize some of the names and voices from previous Us and Them dinner parties. But this year, there are 2 new additions, Lexi and Michael. They're both undergraduate students at nearby Marshall University. Lexi's a double major in political science and psychology, while Michael is a major in political science. We actually had to make tonight's dinner party work around Lexi's cheerleading schedule and Michael's commitments in student government. Lexi admits coming to this dinner is a little nerve-wracking.
I feel like most political conversations that I have are people that are my age and like my peers and that have experienced life through the same lens that I have, or very different, like depending on the issue. I would say the closest that I've ever gotten to talking to politics with anyone older than me has been my mom. And I mean, think about like your political socialization. My mom and I are fairly similar. We have gotten arguments, but we are fairly similar. So this is my first time like ever really engaging in a conversation like this.
Michael, what's it like being here for the first time?
Seems like it's going to be an interesting time. I'm always into having a good political conversation. The first real political memory I have is I just remember like early 2010s when I would always be with my parents when they watched the nightly news, and I picked up a lot of it. So early 2010s was the Obamacare debate, and everyone in the country, I felt, according to my parents, was talking about that. So it was like picking up on those issues at the time, and what my parents were watching the news and exposing me to that material very early led me to being more affluent as to current affairs that are going on.
Did your parents share your political view, or are you like your parents or different than your parents?
I'd say different, but alike in certain respects. My parents both are some of the people that vote, and they take stock of the issues, but they're not as politically charged as I am.
So, jump ball question, how is everybody feeling at this point during campaign season? What words come to mind?
Excited.
Say more.
I'm excited because just the possibilities. I mean, I'm a black female. I'm raising black females, and we have a black female running for president. That's pretty daggone amazing.
Then Frank jumps in with his word of the season.
Trump, restoration of the Republican Party. I'm happy with the decision by the president to step down. I think it was very timely. I think everyone, I share for myself, I think people are tired overall collectively. They kind of want a little bit, the 70 days be done. Hopeful, kind of in awe sometimes with the former president and his running mates, some of the statements they've made and how it's still acceptable. So it's been an interesting couple months so far.
Jay, who's a veteran of the dinner party, says the words that come to mind are shocked and amazed, particularly when it comes to President Joe Biden.
For the cover-up of his mental state for the past 3 years.
Well, they've covered for him. The press, the media. I mean, if you go back and look at all of the things and the gaffes that he's had, they're pretty major, some of them.
Seems like you're moving in your seat, Elliot.
Well, every president has puts his best foot forward. And so you always get the best, and they always try to show them in the best light. I don't know exactly what we want. Do we want competency tests? The people voted for him. I mean, if people can vote for a convicted felon for a president, then they ought to be able to vote for Joe Biden in whatever condition he presented himself as president. And so they did. He stayed. He's done what he needed to do. I don't know what that next step is supposed to be, that Kamala Harris or somebody is supposed to rise up and say, oh, he missed a step today. I mean, when we hear the crazy things that the other candidate had said, the delusional idea that he won the election and still saying that sounds pretty incompetent to me.
I try not to diagnose people that I haven't interacted with. Right? If I did, Donald Trump is a malignant narcissist. I have no doubt about that. But he meets every single criteria. But that's personality, right? It's not the physical effects of aging. So I think intention and just what we can't help and what we can help matters.
Lexi was overseas on the night of the initial debate between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump.
All of my friends, I'm in the Society of Jaeger Scholars, so they're all very involved. They're like, did you watch it? I was like, no, I was packing. What is there to see? And they're like, well, go ahead and download it and watch it on the flight. And watching it was hard, especially as a Democrat, seeing the amount of Trump supporters that were rolling out, and it was kind of worrisome. And I do think that there is a line between him aging and, I mean, of course we all have to acknowledge that he has a stutter, but just kind of seeing it unfold, it was kind of worrisome. Not so much in terms of his competence or his ability to lead, if he were to be elected in office, but looking at support and the inverse of it, people that are watching it fearing that he's not competent and being well, I don't want to vote for somebody that I feel is not here to actually support me, because then what's the point in not showing out to the polls?
One of the things I was hearing was, I think that he is competent to be president of the United States. What I don't think is that he's competent to run for the presidency, that he's incompetent of being a candidate.
Well, he doesn't inspire. At that time, he certainly didn't inspire confidence. I was crushed when I watched it. I watched it with my 26-year-old daughter, because the threat that he would lose support and that we would elect again somebody that I have absolutely no respect for and think he is extremely dangerous to be the president of the United States. That's what I'm worried about.
What's the next thing that happens? Former President Trump is in Butler, Pennsylvania, and there is an assassination attempt. How did you guys feel about that?
My good friend was at the rally. He was midway through the field, and he actually invited me to go to the rally. I was going to the RNC the next week, so I said, nah, I'll be up there. I don't want to go to the rally, so.
I looked to Dr. Annie for more leadership in that moment, because it was a moment where I think everyone who's in any way, shape, or form a leader in the community needs to condemn any attempt at bringing violence into the arena of democracy. Dr. Annie went straight on social media and had a statement condemning it as a Republican public official, and I shared that right away.
Once you start shooting each other, there's not going to be elections. I thought it was a tragedy for the former president, for the individuals that were killed, for the individuals that had to kill that young man. And the other one is that young man that mind was warped to a point that he felt that he had to go do that. His parents now had to bury a son. I mean, and you'll never know the true reason for it, and it's awful.
It should be a wake-up call for the country. This is the attitude we've gotten to the point that someone feels they want to take a gun and try to kill a presidential nominee, essentially.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think we also, as Republicans, we have to atone for where that rhetoric comes from. What has the last 8 years been rhetoric-wise? That we're shocked that these people are being produced. That you have an election, you put up gallows to hang the former vice president. I don't like Mike Pence, but I can see why he didn't support the current nominee. You try to kill him. We are shocked about the response of these things, but we have to atone for where it's coming from.
But what would an atonement look like?
Admit that you're creating these people. I think the Republican Party, and I think the convention was really eye-opening me to watch the RNC convention. Was there was no Mitt Romney, there was no George W. Bush, there was no Nikki Haley, who surrendered her delegates. She wasn't originally invited. There was a divorcement of pre-Trump Republicanism, and now the party is ruled by him.
That brings up something that I've been thinking about. So here you are, Michael. You went to the RNC.
I was there.
How old are you?
I'm 21.
So you're 21. This is like the first time that
First
you voted.
convention, yeah.
My son was eligible to vote at the first 2016, the first election. At the time, my thought at the time was, if I was just coming of age right now, and I was seeing this different type of candidate who was not really a statesman, kind of had a very asymmetrical way of attacking his opponents, I would think that somebody who was coming into the election at this point would say, oh, this is how it's done. And what I was hearing from older people like my age, oh, this is just an anomaly. As soon as Trump is over, we're going to kind of get back to a campaign that would have been more like George W. Bush or Mitt Romney. I don't see that in the cards.
I think you asked a great question, Trey, about is our polarized national politics the new normal? And I think the way we answer that question, figure it out together, is in local politics. Is if you figure out your cities and you figure out your counties and you figure out your states. I think the danger is that as things get more polarized at the national stage, that we all just get all these opinions about where the country needs to go in that direction, or did you see that speech, or the sort of like disinformation, misinformation, and everyone having a hot take. And I don't even know like what good it does to have everyone have a different hot take nationally because of something they saw on TV or on their social media feed. When we were elected to city council, Dr. Annie and I, there was this rush of excitement. People were really excited. And then the next night when we all come to council and we're in it, it's game time, resolutions on the table, budget decisions to be made, the bleachers were, all but really empty. We've tried a lot over the last 2 years to really bring people in across the spectrum to say, what can we do about the overdose crisis? Or, what can we do on climate change? Or what can we do on cannabis? And I think we've made some progress. Now when there's an issue, there's folks there that we're having civil conversation, we're listening. And how I feel about this election is it's starting to, I think, zap some of that progress we've made as folks are getting a little bit more charged at that level of, what's going on in DC. So just the other council night, we had a vote to take a step forward in decriminalizing cannabis. This is a bill that Dr. Annie worked with a Democrat, and it was a great bill. There were folks there for a proclamation earlier in the night, including one good friend. And so she's there, and I said, you got to stick around after the proclamation. We need your voice on this cannabis bill. And she's like, well, I got to go home to watch the DNC.
Gosh, there's so many ways I want to go, and there was one way I wanted to go, but one thing I wanted to say is that we've got Michael and Lexi here. Now, I know that many of the people here are over 40 at least at this table, if not, yeah.
35, sir.
I think that we've talked about some pretty worthy topics, but are they your topics? Are they the things that are causing you concern? People your age?
You got the lead.
I think that a lot of the national debate does affect us because we hear about it, but in reality, it doesn't. For me, one of my biggest issues that will be driving me to the polls this November is inflation and the economy.
How does it affect you?
Go to the grocery store.
How does it affect you?
How does inflation affect me?
Yeah.
You should see the grocery bills I have every week trying to save money. It is impacting me because of the money that I'm having to spend out of my own pocket, and the price of everything has increased.
Yeah, there are issues that I care about and issues that I feel like I'm not necessarily heard of. Like heard like when I'm talking about it. The first thing that comes to my mind is campus carry, especially being a daughter of Marshall. That's terrifying to live on campus. I'm required to live on campus. I'm required to live in the dorms because of my scholarship. And to know that I'm put there in that situation, and the fact that Marshall went to the legislature and we told them this is not what we want.
So to somebody who would be listening to this not in West Virginia, can you explain what the campus carry issue is here in West Virginia?
You can legally carry a gun on campus. It has to be concealed, meaning that I can't see it. I shouldn't know that you have it, but there are places on campus in which it's legal for you to carry a gun. You can have it in the dorms. It just needs to be in a safe. You can have it in the classroom. Again, you can't see it, but yeah, there are very few places on campus where you cannot have it.
I would like to make a distinction on that is before 2023, when Senate Bill 10, which is the campus self-defense, the campus carry bill was passed, it was completely legal for somebody to be on a university campus if they were not employed or a student there, if they had a concealed carry that they were legally allowed to hold. Now, there were restrictions on it, but fundamentally, if you were legally allowed to own one but weren't a student or weren't employed, you were allowed to own a firearm.
And so now students can have them, which is the concern. And now students are coming out and are saying, I don't feel safe. I do not feel safe knowing that there are guns in my dorm where I am required to live, and I feel like I'm not being heard on that issue. And that's something that concerns me. It concerns me to know that I'm in a classroom where I'm encouraged to have these political conversations, where we're crying out for help, saying that we can't have these real conversations anymore because they're so polarized. And somebody may be in the back row who may be struggling with some type of mental health issue, or maybe one of my friends are in the dorm and they're struggling with a mental health issue, and now their roommate has a gun in the safe where it's easily accessible. Or maybe somebody I don't know got drunk and had a rough night and they're in the dorm and they're struggling with something and there's nowhere to go or nobody to call. And now here it is, it's affecting them, it's affecting me. We keep saying it, I feel like nobody's listening. But at the same time, I also realize that the people in my age range aren't voting. And so why do you feel as a politician that you're gonna sit here and really listen to my age group, even though we might be tweeting the loudest or reposting or resharing whenever we don't show up? We don't show up, we don't show out. Why would you care? Because, you're not in college, right? So I feel like the vote for you is different than the vote is for me because I'm the one living it.
Gosh, I'm going to see how old I am. 35. I'm not that old. I'm not that old. When I went to WVU as an undergraduate, you could have a firearm, but it had to be locked with the chamber bolt. So if you have a handgun, you go through the middle part of the chamber, you put a lock through it, and then you had to go through this whole thing where you had to go to the campus police chief, the local, you had to do a lot of stuff to get there. I have plenty of firearms. I think you should have the right to own handguns. But when there's a student right there that's a young person that's saying that they feel unsafe, maybe there's a middle ground here where you could say to buy a handgun you have to be 21 years old. You have to go through extra training to learn how to do it. You have to be trained with it. You have to do all this other stuff. There could be a middle ground, but it felt like that legislation, it was theoretical, not practical, and it was passed with not a lot of downstream opinions on it.
My thing about campus carry is, as someone who I support the right of an individual to own a firearm. It is in the Constitution, and I have never been fearful on Marshall's campus. And as someone who worked in a prosecutor's office and saw gun crimes, the thing I told people when I'm in student government at Marshall, and when this bill came up, we passed a resolution to oppose it as the voice of the student body, and I was the only vote against it. And my explanation was, even though it's technically illegal now, the only way to stop somebody from committing harm on a campus is a big brick wall. If there is a will, there is a way. No one is going to care what the law says. We've seen mass shootings happen in places where they are supposed to be gun-free zones.
But Michael, it's more than just mass shootings, and that's what
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is the ability, I'm going to say it bluntly, we have signs on our doors saying no firearms allowed in here, but if someone truly wants to cause harm, they're going to do it anyway.
But the problem is accessibility, Michael, and I feel like that's where you're failing to recognize the point. The problem is accessibility. If somebody wants to do something, I can't fail but to acknowledge that they will. But I'm saying accidents, it's so much more. Michael, I came to college at the age of 17. I was not grown. I'm not grown now. And I feel like it's so much easier to make quick, rash decisions whenever you come into the situation you're already not doing anything wrong.
Well, and the problem is the permission structure. Guns for everybody everywhere. Let's have more guns. I mean, this is what our legislature has done. Let them take them to the park. Let them take them to the pool. Let them take them to the university campus. And that is tacit permission and it is encouragement to have guns in places where guns really don't belong. I went to college. A lot of us did. Boy, I tell you, there were a lot of things that happened there and a lot of people I met that really, really ought not to have a gun.
I'm not too much worried. You go to the extremes of the mass shootings and everything and all this other stuff. What I'm worried about is the 24-year-old man who is dealing with depression, got a firearm. I mean, that's a big killer of young men is firearm deaths. And I am not against a person having the right to have a firearm. We just do a real poor job of filtering any form of barrier to them getting that weapon. That's what I'm thinking about.
And I think about the fact that we no longer have security guards at the desk in our dorms. So then who's going to be the first person that gets there? Probably the RA in one out of the 4 Commons buildings. That's going to be the first person here, the first person to respond. There's just so much, and the one thing that we changed was putting a tap at the elevator. That's our one safety thing, because what are we to do? And I just feel like so much of the student body was left uninformed. I mean, Marshall did their best, but I don't blame Marshall. I'm blaming the legislature. I feel like it all came down really fast.
As I listened to this intergenerational discussion about the risks of going to school in 2024, I realized the frankness of it is heartbreaking. Just a few weeks after this discussion, another school shooting makes headlines, this time in Georgia at Appalachia High School. We all get to a point where our plates are empty, and it's time for dessert. And that's coming up after a break. You're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council and the CRC Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
it's Trey, and welcome back to Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting. We're gathered around the dining room table at my mom's house in Charleston, West Virginia for our annual Us and Them potluck dinner. We're talking about all sorts of topics with guests all around the table who reflect a diverse mix. Some of my guests have joined these dinner parties since we started them 4 years ago, while others are new to the table. But everyone's joined in on the conversation. And now that we've polished off the main course and the side dishes, it's time for some sweet treats.
Jay, can you tell us what we have here for dessert?
That's banana pudding.
And then we got like a big chocolate cake here, which seems like people take at least a quarter of it. One word that has come up often in this election cycle is democracy. And I read several weeks ago in a Pew Research study that over 70% of Americans say the U.S. used to be a good example of democracy, but it isn't anymore. I'm wondering if that resonates with any of you, and if it does, why?
Well, it does because of the gerrymandering that's going on with the legislative districts. You have the efforts to try to control the mix of voting. All of these things where people are complaining about the voting, where some folks were complaining about the voting, were minority districts. I wonder why that happened. That's, a great example of an attempt at disenfranchisement. All these laws that we're trying to pass now and the things that some of our officials are doing to restrict voting are sad to see, and they indicate a diminishment of democracy.
I feel like in real, kinship and affinity with this group and the space that you create, Trey, I do worry about the long shadow that former President Trump creates when he casts doubts on how American democracy works and how that creates a kind of denial of the democratic process. There's this political force or trend called the Overton window. It's when you push something really, really far by design so that still a fairly extreme view can look moderate. So if you say the election was cooked, and then folks say, well, look, I don't know what really happened, but we have to move past that. That's the Overton window in play, right? That's Trump being very effective at casting an extreme doubt that then a medium doubt looks normal and healthy and just let's just move beyond, let's have coffee.
Trump is accused of destroying democracy, and the Dems have a candidate that no one voted for, but was appointed, and it just amazes me. RFK was kept off of the ballot. Cornel West was basically kept off of the ballot.
And now they are making RFK stay on the ballot.
Yeah, now they're going
to make
him
stay on the
in a couple of states. And I just, they're accusing Trump of destroying democracy, and I see them being the ones that have already destroyed it for their candidate.
Then Michael, a student at Marshall University, jumps in.
I would make a point that once I get this pudding, hey, there you go, that the attempts to remove President Trump from the ballot, saying that you believe that the former president is a threat to democracy and then try to take him off of a ballot, I feel is subverting the will of the people. And the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the state of Colorado couldn't do that.
This is an example of how it is that we are failing to be democratic.
Exactly. People are saying, well, we don't support President Trump, let's get him off the ballot.
But these are old laws that people have now found apply to the only president who's done these things. But I think it was a very pragmatic ruling by the Supreme Court to leave him on the ballot. We've got to save ourselves from Trumpism and all that kind of thing, and we've got to vote this out and not simply have it done by some technical.
Because if it was a legal decision, that would seem illegitimate.
It might. To a lot of people,
right.
It would.
Right. And it would set a precedent so that states then could effect a national election. So I do feel that was pragmatic. But we mentioned January 6th. What I would say is when we fail to have a peaceful transition of power, we look less like a democracy and more like an autocracy.
I agree 100%. In my opinion, as a Republican on January 6th and on the 2020 election in general, is President Trump lost. Were there irregularities? Yes, there were some. Was it enough to overturn the election? We will never know. We, as the Republican Party, cannot dwell on the past. we can learn that, yes, there might have been some lack of trust in the voting process that needed to be quelled.
Michael's comments about a lack of trust in the voting process make me think about the very first Us and Them dinner party back in 2020. That year, we also had a meeting before and after the election. I remember in our second dinner, Jay said he had no confidence in Joe Biden's victory. At that time, I thought that view was fringe at best. However, 4 years later, many still question the election results. And that's despite no widespread evidence of voter fraud, lost court challenges, and other efforts to dispel conspiracies. It makes me wonder whether Jay has doubts about this year's election process.
If observers in Detroit are not allowed to observe, there'll be problems. If there's problems with counting the vote with the machines, there'll be problems.
What about with certifying the vote? Do you have any issue with the attempts that are being made to put into place the ability for counties not to certify the votes of the people of that county?
I don't really.
Who's going to certify them?
I'm not aware.
The county elections board.
You're talking about after the election.
After the election, like is that concerning to you? Because that's concerning to me about whether or not we're going to know who won the vote.
Every time anybody has tried to do that, it has tried to question the ballots. They've counted them and they found they were consistent. So where's the inconsistency that leads to our lack of confidence?
When you count a ballot that is there, that's not a problem. But how did that ballot get there? Who voted it and how many and so forth? How many of the dead people voted? Now, I'm from Clay County, okay? There's a lot of people used to vote in Clay County that did not have a right to vote.
All right, Clay County folks. When I go to vote, I just feel like there's something really sacred about all the folks that are there. There's something like above politics with almost, I don't know, all the folks that are volunteering or quasi-volunteering, but you could tell like it's a lot of retirees, it's a lot of folks that feel like they believe in democracy, that they're like, that they've signed up to sort of not just be there, but to actively take part, to walk you around the room, to make sure that you have privacy, to make sure that your vote counts. I have faith in those folks, and I have faith that if anyone wants to be a part of that there's ways to be a part of that it's not this exclusive club, that American democracy is hands-on, and that generally our elections do work, and that if something goes wrong, you cross that bridge, but that because anyone can be a part of it, because it's transparent, because it's sacred, I think in American politics, that if you start completely casting doubt all over it, then the ground upon which we stand just becomes quicksand.
Last night, I listened to our discussion last year. A big topic of that was trust. Can you name anything that has happened since last year that would have increased our trust in this country and in the officials and so forth? I can name you a whole bunch that would have diminished it.
As someone who used to serve on a county Republican executive committee, both executive committees, Democrats and Republicans, play a role in ensuring that their parties have faith in the process. I've been at the courthouse on election night as the ballots were brought in. We had a contested election in Ohio County 2 years ago where the contest was handled. It was a Republican contest. So our ballot commissioner and the county executive committee were responsible. But even in those contested Democrat-Republican races, both parties, I feel, can, if they come together and say, look, we want free and fair elections, because that's what both parties do want. It's about how you get there. It's a little different. And I think that ensuring that both sides have that confidence.
Frank?
So there was a theorem that I heard recently. It was called the magic spell box theorem. I don't know if people are familiar with this. You take voting, for instance. Back in the day, you go in, you write your ballot down, and you put it in a glass jar of who you want to vote for. As population increases, more people get the right to vote. You can't do that anymore, so there's a standardization that happens. But okay, I buy that system. Then a couple decades go by, you have voter ID registration, you have things coming in the mail. Okay, that seems legit. You have the parties that are there that say it's legit, that say when one loses. And I think that's really what has come down, that when both say that one lost, one won. Then you get to a point where the system has gotten so complex. If you ask me how a voting system works, I can't tell you. Can anyone tell you exactly how your cell phone works? It's the magic spell box. It just works. As the systems have become more complex, there's less experts in how these multifaceted systems work. The conspiracies can crop up in legitimate questions, and they can't be easily answered by certain election or county officials. And then the ambiguity and the mistrust starts brewing. And then if you have one side of the political spectrum that says no, then it gets out of there.
But here, that kind of sets up a question that I want to ask Jay. When I hear you say, you give the various examples that you did, I'm kind of like what Frank's talking about. That what you may be talking about is legitimate, but I have no idea.
You can't comprehend my position.
It's not that I can't comprehend your position. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe I can't comprehend your position. But what I don't understand is how the example that you posed should persuade me that there is a problem with the integrity of our elections.
I wasn't trying to persuade you. I was telling you how I felt. Okay. You asked a question.
No, I did ask the question, but I guess my question to you would be, I wish that you could actually persuade me, or I wish I could persuade you that, man, there's something really wrong with our election system, and we got to get to the bottom of it. Or I'd like to persuade you to say we should have trust in it.
Trey, and Felicia and the rest of you that would disagree, I'm not trying to sway you. What's important for me is for you to understand where I'm coming from.
Right, what we have to be in mourning for is that there is somebody who has led this whole argument that our elections weren't fair. We know in West Virginia we've had some crazy elections in the past, and we know we've had some voter identity issues in West Virginia. We know we've had that, but we keep getting better. What I'm in mourning for is that there's somebody who continues to agitate, and people who've jumped on the bandwagon with him to tell people that our elections are not fair when we get better every single time. We get better at this. So how did it all of a sudden blow up so that it's not that?
I feel that a little of it too, because of 2020 and the fact that there was a pandemic and there were a lot of conspiracies floating around. The problem with conspiracy theories are the more you deny it to somebody and tell them, hey, no, the 2020 election wasn't stolen, the more you are fueling their fire to try to for them to try to prove it. And I feel that
how do you break out of that cycle?
It's a very hard cycle to break out of. In 2022, how many candidates on the GOP ran on the platform of election denial and very serious questions about election integrity? None, if very few, won. I mean, there were a few, but I take, for example, the Pennsylvania governor's race, Doug Mastriano. Right. That race, in my opinion, was winnable if you had the right Republican candidate. But someone who keeps talking about a past election was not going to win over Pennsylvania voters. And he lost, and he even lost in some red counties in Pennsylvania.
I just want to seize on one of the things you said. You have identified yourself as a proud Republican. Do you feel that the current standard bearer, the nominee of the Republican Party, that he continues to keep talking about this election, do you feel like it hurts your party?
Absolutely. I feel, like I've said, it hurt 2022. All these far-right candidates that were put up and lost because they were too far to the right. They were Trump's handpick.
What I feel like I've observed with the Trump movement is that within the Republican Party, there seems to be the absolute opposite of a profiling courage. That, for instance, if you were to articulate forcefully what you just said, it would be like, you are a rhino. Exactly. You are somebody that is not to be trusted, but that a real American
believes that the election was stolen. I mean, like I said earlier, there were irregularities. There were discrepancies with the election system, as
there always are.
Exactly. will we ever know if that was enough to sway? We will not. The 2020 election came and went. It's time to move on.
You have not heard me say it was stolen. I say I had no confidence in it. It may have been, it may not. I can't prove it. But it was not the election they wanted you to believe.
Is there any other election you've had that feeling about?
Hanging Chad?
Probably not.
And there's one catalyst in this whole thing. The person who said that the election has been stolen. That's the catalyst. If there are no others where you have no confidence.
Why do you think he does that?
Well, it's been very profitable for him. He's still a relevant figure now because he's kept saying that and because he's gotten followers to say that. So
and give me your money, give me your money. He raises money off of it like crazy.
So, I mean, he's relevant because of that.
What do you Republicans think of that, Terry? I mean,
now he needs to keep his mouth shut. He needs to let this go. Now, I feel like he does. Yes, there is enough irregularities that we're never going to know. But what's interesting is it seems like the last couple months there's something in the paper monthly now where they back to the election, back to the 20, where they're proving that there's problems. In Georgia, just last week, they've indicted somebody in the county level for 2020. So I don't know, but we need to let it go.
I'd like to go to a historical example real quick. Obviously, the last real contested election was the 2000 election in Florida with the Hanging Chads. 2 years later, the Congress passed HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, which was a way for the federal government to help ensure Americans had confidence in their election system again after they had just went through the court battle of Bush v. Gore 2 years earlier. Right. And here I just feel like there wasn't that much of an initiative from the federal government, from Congress, to assure Americans of both parties the elections will be secure, they will be safe, and they will be trustable. I didn't feel like there was that much of an initiative to sort of damage control, per se.
Out of the corner of my eye, I've been watching Lexi, and she's been sitting back quietly, watching others for a while and taking it all in. Then she has something to say.
I think that there's a difference between not having confidence and like being worried and what that means and fear mongering. If you are like really concerned about the security of your elections, then that's a scary thought. Our country is built on the foundation of democracy, right? Whatever you look at democracy, whatever that means to you, it means something to you as an American. It may not be the same definition to me as it is to you, but it means something to you. And so if you're sitting there and like you're really worried and you're concerned, then that's something that we should address. But if we're sitting there and like we're trying to like spread these lies to like maintain a certain objective, at that point I think that that's whenever we shut down the conversation, that we don't talk about it anymore. But to dismiss anybody that like has any type of fear or worries, like I feel like that's just gonna send us further down this trajectory of, well, you didn't acknowledge that I said this the last time and here we are again. Like, I don't want you to feel like that.
I wanted to say something that's positive about voter integrity now. Judicial Watch, which is a right-leaning I don't know what you want to call them, a bunch of lawyers that do really good work. They sued, they started with California, Ohio, North Carolina, Texas, to clean up their voter rolls because it is a law that voters are. By the way, West Virginia's is very clean. Mike Warner did a great job getting ours cleaned up. But millions and millions have been taken off of them. So we should have a little bit more confidence, in especially those states, that those rolls are cleaned up. There's all the dead people are gone. I mean, you're talking millions of people that were on there that shouldn't have been. Either they've moved or they haven't voted. It makes me feel a little better. Then they're going state by state, basically. I think North Carolina's now done. Ohio's done. Pennsylvania, California was a big one.
Would you be concerned if there is a sizable number of people who show up to vote and just learn at that point that they've been taken off the rolls and they shouldn't have been?
You know how they did it? There's a rule or a law. If you have not voted in the last two elections, two national elections, then you're taken off. If that's the case, then you.
Why does that exist? Like, if you haven't gone to buy bread for a month and then they say you can't buy bread anymore, like I just don't get it.
I didn't know that because
Elliot, what do you?
No, there's no reason for that. There's no reason to take people off because they haven't voted in 2 elections.
They were all notified. They all sent, they were sent letters.
You can't buy bread. Here's a postcard. We sent it to you.
Well, yeah, that's true. I do like the fact that they are cleaned up. And on your case, I don't know if they showed up, and maybe they do get to vote.
One thing that's changing here in West Virginia in this election cycle is that this will be the first time in a long time, that there's not going to be any Democrat in the United States Senate coming from West Virginia. Joe Manchin is going to be gone. And so my question is, what do you think that means for West Virginia?
Not much. It's going to mean a lot to the.
It depends on how the presidency goes.
That's exactly right. Well, no, even if it doesn't, it's critical. Whether it goes to the president, whether it's Trump or Harris, it doesn't matter. The Senate is we need to take the Senate back, and we're a key factor in that. Yeah. Will be.
I can just speak from, again, my level. It's a loss in the sense of, so Shelley Moore Capito and Joe Manchin served on the Appropriations Committee. And so they have a balance between Republican and Democrat. We were the only state that had 2 members on that committee. That's why there was a lot of money coming our way federally. With only one, some of that will stop. You can have a whole 4 hours talking about Joe Manchin and everything, but we go from Joe Manchin, who did have those contacts, to a junior senator, most likely the current governor, going to the Senate. I hope he lives in D.C., doesn't commute from the Greenbrier, but we're starting over from that seat. From our level at City Council, that is something that's been made appropriate to both of us. That's a big thing.
When I asked the question, you were the first to laugh, Elliot. So why do you think it's not such a loss?
The loss is going to be, we're going to have a senator who won't show up. We are going to be absolutely irrelevant. If this man won't make the trip from White Sulphur Springs to Charleston to do his work that we elect him to do you think he's going to go and, with all the sharp elbows in D.C. and the fighting that you have to do to try to get something done? He had no legislative agenda during his time in office as governor. And does somebody really believe that he's going to go to D.C., live in D.C., and fight for the things that West Virginians need? Does anybody believe he's going to show up for work? Anybody? Of course not.
Felicia?
No, I don't. And I don't feel, and yes, as Democrats, we need to maintain the Senate, the majority of the Senate. But policy-wise, I don't feel like Joe Manchin, like you could tell him from a Republican most of the time. So that's what I meant when I said policy-wise, we're not missing a lot.
I have a very simplistic view of all this. I mean, we can, all the hierarchical stuff with the Senate and comparisons and pundits, it's money at the end of the day. Everything, what I've learned from city government, everything's $1 million. You want a new drainage system in Rolling Hills, it's $1 million. You want a new sidewalk, $1 million. Having the ability and really people in Congress that can go and get money, grants, things like that is very important. Having staff that listens to you. And I'll say this about Joe Manchin, as someone that has had people that are foreign-born medical graduates who need help with visas. Manchin's office has always been amazing. Capito's office has always been great. I don't know when you have when all those people are leaving, we're 50% down for all these little things. It's trying to get as much resources and advocate for your area as you can.
Here we are. When this episode airs, it's going to be sometime in the fall before the election. I think everybody has a pretty strong emotional opinion on what's at stake in the election and what they'd like the outcome to be. We have all agreed that we're going to have another dinner party here in the fall. We're going to meet the Thursday after the election. And my question to each of you is, do you have any trepidation of having this group come back and meet again after that election, such a high-stakes election? Lexi, why don't you tell me what you think about that?
Oh, my head was shaking. No, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. I am nervous about it, but not so much about talking to you guys about it, just seeing how it's going to change our country.
I'm all for coming back. My only fear is doing it that Thursday immediately after, is we might not have the results.
And that might be part of the tension that we need to wade through.
I can come and be elated or devastated, and I'll still feel safe in expressing it here. There's nothing to fear here amongst us to have this conversation.
Especially with that mac and cheese.
We're just Americans with our own.
That was good mac and cheese. I want some mac and cheese.
Oh, thank you.
And the pudding, and the sweet potato casserole.
Sitting down with my dinner party guests offers a fresh perspective. Everyone shares what matters to them going into this election, not because they believe America is a lost cause, but because they think things can get better. We'll be back at the end of November, after Election Day, with the second part of our dinner party series, and we'll hope you join us. You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this show was me, Trey Kay, Christina Stella, and Kate Smith. Special thanks to my mom, Kathy Kay, for letting us gather once again in her beautiful home. And thanks to Cole Madley of Loud and Clear in Cincinnati for getting us the mics to record everyone around the table. Michael Lipton, Tristan Lozow, and Ahmed Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, and the CRC Foundation. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Are you gathering around a dinner table with people who have a worldview totally different than yours? Share those comments with us on our Facebook page or on X, which is formerly known as Twitter, at Us Them Podcast. Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the mentorship program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.